Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're still awake. I need to grab the remote over there. Okay, that works. So, it's a mouthful of a title. What I want to talk about is, first, I'm really delighted to have a chance to share those thoughts about lean and agile software development. And what I want to discuss are two things. First, why it's relevant in a complex world, and why in a complex organization it may be difficult to grow. So, let me see, that works. So I will follow a simple outline. First, I will draw from my experience for the last 10 years, but why I found it necessary to add what I call lean roots to agile. So lean and agile, for me, it's adding a few practices from lean to the agile practices. Because of the complexity of the world we live in, it works perfectly well for digital, but it's larger than this. Then I'll step back and I'll try to discuss what makes it difficult for a large company. Remember the talk from Mark Schwartz this morning about how you bring lean to bureaucracy. So my take on this is lean and agile practice, they are not built, they are grown, if you can thought that. They are bottom up, and your role as a leader or manager is to sort of make sure that the conditions are making it possible to grow those practices. And I'll try to share a few thoughts about that. And then the consequence is, okay, if you believe those are the conditions, what do we need to do in terms of governance, in terms of the way, the culture of those large companies to do so that these changes are made possible. So, obviously, many in the rooms, they know much more about Agile than I do, so I will simply give a very, very, very simple set of ideas so that you understand the follow-up of the reasoning. So for me, Agile is defined with sort of a few characteristics. The first one is iterative development, step by step, with small steps, small lots, and time-boxed developments, called the so-called sprints. The second important idea is you measure, you move along your sprints, and you constantly measure the value that you deliver to your customer, and you measure the customer satisfaction. I think that was pointed out many times during the day. Agile is based on teams. They are self-organized teams, cross-functional, and a major difference compared to, let's say, waterfall is the conception, the development, the design, and the architecture are co-developed step by step, sprint by sprint. And last but not least, we've seen this during this morning and this afternoon, the face-to-face communication, the synchronized work, which is the exact opposite of the bureaucracy, by the way, is a key part of the Agile way of working. So, this being said, let me start by saying that Agile is actually a good answer to the complex world, the volatile, uncertain world. And the best metaphor I have, sorry, it's for those of you who've been following me, it's an old picture, but it's a great story. It's a robotic arm from Tokyo University, which is able to catch an egg thrown at very fast speed, or which is able to play baseball much better than a human player. And this is before the age of AI. That is, the reason the robot is so good is not because there is a really smart piece of software, it's because it sees at the frequency of 50,000 images per second. So this problem, which is very hard for us, becomes simple for the robot, because for the robot, it's actually a very slow process. You have to imagine that 50,000 images per second is quite a feast of technology. But I think it's exactly what agility is about. Another way to look at it is to say, when should I move to Agile is what are the things I want to avoid? And I'm pointing this out because actually those are things that you can measure. And in the previous 10 years, I found out that those are the things that that are telling me that I should change the way I operate my software development. So first, it's rework. How much number of iterations do you need to do to deliver a piece of code? Second is things that arrive too late, miss time to market. Undeployed code, which obviously if you don't measure this, you really should. And last but not least, there is the communication waste is very general. In 2010, when I started reorganizing our software factory for set-top boxes at Bouygues Telecom, we did a big sort of survey/audit, and found that teams were waiting for one another everywhere. So the major waste was everybody sort of waiting for somebody else to be done with their parts. And what I'm saying is, okay, if you have any of those problems, then you should move to Agile. And actually, Agile gives you a number of benefits in a complex world. It's very, very good against volatility because of the backlog mechanism, because of the reprioritization, because of the sprint frequency, assuming that you have frequent deployment. It's also very good for uncertainty, assuming that everybody understands what user stories are in the same manner, and I will come back on that point. And sort of more generally, it's a good approach towards complexity and ambiguity up to a point. And up to a point brings me to what I wanted to say is, over the last 10 years, after doing 10 years of Agile development, I moved around in 2010 to lean software development and decided to add 3 things. For those of you who are lean enthusiasts, you could say that there are already many lean roots in Agile development, but so I'm just going to add 3 more. The first one, which is the key idea of Mary and Tom Poppendick's book, is really moving from project to product. And it's very important because it means moving from short-term to long-term. And I was delighted to hear Pierre talking about making people, because I would say one of the key ideas that you can remember is, if you look at all the companies from the web giants, the ones that we love and adore, and that are doing releases every 12 seconds and that are so good, they are extremely fast because of the people, because of the skills. And one of the key ideas of Lean gives you the focus, the long-term focus on skills and people that will make you agile later on. And another way to say it, but I think I have a slide about that, is agility is not always things that you do in the moment, it's things that you've done in the past. The second key idea is visual management applied to system thinking, because visual management is part of Agile. But for me, if I move on to your Gemba and your development squads, I will look whether I see picture of the system displayed on the walls or not. If I do, then I know that the lean spirit is there in the Toyota way sense. That is, you're really trying to understand the system that you're building better. And if you want to take a very different example, you can read the wonderful book from Google called Site Reliability Engineering, which is about how do you do operation excellence for digital systems. And it's all about system engineering and understanding your systems. So for me, it's something that is not part of the traditional Agile toolset, and that will make a big, big difference. And last but not least, and I will go very, very fast, because during all the day we've heard about how Kaizen was important, and there is much more in the lean tradition of Kaizen than simply the good practices of Agile, even of Scrum. No need to speak further. I think that was much better explained during the day. So to summarize, when I come to a new company, for instance, when I join Michelin, or when I visit another company, there are 4 practices that I'm looking for that will tell me whether I'm looking at an Agile development shop or a place where there's some lean Agile software happening. And first is, do I see the voice of the customer on the Gemba? That is, and not, I'm talking really on the place where people are coding. My experience in my previous jobs was really that bringing the voice of the customers, the good stories and the bad, to be displayed on the walls where the people are actually building the code made a huge difference. The second one I already mentioned is the systemic visual management. A3 for Kaizen, that is, are we doing Kaizen up to the level of discipline and rigor, as was asked in the questions earlier, because I totally agree with what you said. It's one thing to talk about problem solving, it's another thing to learn to do the 5 whys, to write your PDCA, to make your A3 and get them improved step by step. At AXA, it took us a long, long time to get that right, but it clearly delivers a lot of value. And last but not least, it's sort of a favorite of mine of the lean software, is bringing the 5S to software. That is, sorting, organizing, making sure that your code is as beautiful and shining as possible and as well organized as possible for future update and future change. And I will come back on that point. It's for me, the difference between project and product shows in your code. If you write a code that's designed for a project, it will be the same look as code which is written for a product where you're going to do constant changes and releases after releases. So once you put all this together, you have this lean and agile practice, and it's better suited for the complex world. I will point out three things. The complexity of our world, for me, can be expressed as the system that we are building will grow from their contact with the environment. For those of you who are familiar with Nassim Taleb, and it's really the idea of anti-fragile. An anti-fragile something is a system that gets better because it's hurt, because it's of. So you're confronting the bad reviews on the Apple Store, as explained by Marie-Pierre this morning. You're sort of facing a number of adverse conditions, and that makes you stronger. And for me, you need the lean spirit to capture that. It's all about learning, making people, capitalization. Second, it's very actually related. In a digital world, and as was said, when I was at AXA, I developed mobile apps, and it's a tough world. Most of the things that you develop, they don't work as well as planned. You get crappy notation on the App Store. It's a hard world. And the only way to succeed is really to be obsessed with customer feedback, as was explained beautifully by Bianca this morning. And last, and this is why I took this beautiful picture, the product approach compared to is absolutely necessary to take care of your technical debt and refactoring. So it's a kind of a common law of complex systems. If you have an iterative process, it's going to create garbage. It's true in your living cells, it's true in biology, it's true. Any system that you look at, iteration, very fast, very frequent iteration will produce garbage, waste. And you have to refactor. And thinking of your software development as a product, software lifecycle, helps to make sure that you pay the proper attention to refactoring. So, if this is the pitch, now let's think about what makes it possible in a large-scale organization. The first idea is that Agile to work, it has to be shared, a shared mental model by every company. We had a pivotal moment at Bouygues Telecom. We took the whole exec-com to visit Spotify. And the CEO of Spotify explained to us how he was operating his company, and to make the long story short, said, I don't understand my customers, they're changing their usage every month. My competitors are very fast, they're changing their competitive offers every month. So whenever we do a strategic plan, after 3 months it's dead. So we've changed, and we're actually building our strategy one step at a time. And we saw that then IT at Spotify, actually digital systems at Spotify, they are part of a much larger scope or way of thinking, which is really the whole company is agile. And if you don't do that, if you do water scrum, that is, if your teams are working in agile mode, but the rest of the company, or at least the stakeholders, have a very classical view, shared mental model of how value is made, then you get a very small part of the agile benefits. It does work, but you're missing most of the value. Let me take 2 other examples. So one of the great idea of the moment, if you're going to hire somebody to help your for your company to become more innovative, you're going to be told, look at what the best startups, the best entrepreneurs are doing, and sooner or later, effectuation will come in place. So if you're not familiar with effectuation, you can Google it later. It's a set of practices that was extracted from the most efficient, most successful startup companies. And those are exactly what I'm talking about when I talk about mental model. It's a great idea if we all agree. So let's take one example. Effectuation says you should do with what you have. So it's a very good piece of advice, and it's actually a signature of success in a complex world. Except that if your stakeholders believe that whenever there is a problem, you should ask for more money, more resources, more time, then it won't work. I mean, it only works if everybody in the company believes that that's the way to think about how to solve a difficult situation. Another great effectuation principle is when life throws you lemon, make lemonade, that is, every bad news is something that will make you stronger. And I can tell you from experience, if it's a shared idea in a company, it actually works. If it's not shared, it doesn't work at all, and you should keep your effectuation advice for yourself because you're going to make everybody miserable. User stories, it's also a wonderful thing. That is, if you think as a user story as a disguised requirement from the old age, that is, you took your classical requirement, now you call it user story, it doesn't work, it doesn't help, it sort of doesn't bring more value. I said earlier that designing your system with user stories will make you stronger and better fitted to the complex world. It only works if everybody in the company, including marketing and your CEO, and understands what a user story is the same way, and so on. I think you're getting my point. The last part, what I want to say is, as Pierre mentioned, Agile is not a magic word to get more of what I want without telling precisely what I want and sort of pushing the effort back to some other people. It actually requires motivation and engagement from everybody in the company. So you get what I'm saying here. Agile really works, except that it has to be shared. It's not... This I can probably go quicker because it should be obvious to all the lean practitioners in the room. So you see this reference to the wonderful book by Brian Nelson. It says that if you want to operate in a lean manner, you need buffers. That it's based on queuing theories, very simple. Once you don't have, once you have no too much work in process and no margins, you're reducing your flexibility and your activity. So that's what you learn when you learn about lean. This is so true that there is this great quote, it's even better in French, by Yves Caseau, saying that if you want to cooperate, to collaborate, you need to have margins, buffers, and then you put them at the disposals of others. If you have a system where nobody has any margin, there is no cooperation. Everybody's doing their own job. And the idea of working together for the customers is only something that you put on the slides. It's not part of the real life. So actually, I'm going to move to the last one. What we are doing at Michelin right now is creating something which looks a little bit like what Kenneth told about BNP this morning. It's creating a buffer. It's 10% buffer. It's a buffer for the team. It's self-organized towards the shared goal of better customer satisfaction, and in our case, sort of excellent operational excellence. And the idea, that's sort of the line number 3, is there cannot be continuous improvement and learning by doing without a little bit of flexibility. And so it's almost self-evident. So let me come back about this idea that you need continuous feedback from the users or the customers to develop an exciting product, to develop value. And what I want to point out is this is very simple for small structures like startups, but the larger the company, the more difficult it is. We tend to terrorize our access to the users, access to the consumers. And I've seen over the last 15 years that creating the feedback loop that Bianca showed this morning, it's a fight. It happens, but you will have to fight for it. Access to the user, access to the consumer, it's something which is not so obvious. And my experience is it's actually very necessary especially in the digital world. Back to this idea of building digital services, you really need this feedback. And the other thing that I found in my last 10 years is creating this feedback loop as a shared stream among many teams. When you have scrums of scrums, for instance, when we're building the set-top box, it was a large software factory with 15 squads. And to align those 15 squads, the voice of the customer is a very powerful tool. So, last condition, which is probably more difficult to explain in a few minutes. But if you look at the web giants or the companies which are very successful, you can see that eventually, it's It starts with customer voice and design and everything, but eventually you have to write software and you have to write good software. And the companies which are very good, they are very good at writing software. But that's not what I want to point out here. What I want to point out here is that this idea that software matters has to be part of the values of the company, of the mindset. So it's something which has to be more so those two first points, they are probably internal to the software organization, the IT organization, the digital organization. What really matters is, at a larger scale, the company should value its technical skills and respect technical experience. And I'll give you one I'll try to make this easier to grab. What complex means is the context is important and it cannot be shared easily. So if you have a complex problem, then I cannot put on a PowerPoint a description of the problem and give it to you, and you can. If that was the case, it would not be such a complex problem. When you hire technical experts, it means that if their expertise is about complex situations, it means that they can make good decisions without being able to explain it to you. And I think the audience is half French, half international. We French people tend to love to understand everything and conceptualize everything. So we are poorly equipped to the idea that we have to respect experience and the ability to make good judgment without being able to explain everything. And I found over the last 15 years that it's a challenge. So let me now address or try to address, because it's a very interesting question, address how to change the governance and change what I call the DNA of a large organization. So first, as I said, we need to move from project to product. And when I say we, it's not the IT shop or the digital department, it's really the whole company. And the reason for this is thinking in terms of products allows to factor in the long-term vision, the fact that you are building capabilities for the future, and the fact that the velocity, the thing that the business likes, which is the ability to react very fast, usually comes from the skills, the people, what you've built in the past. And if you have a project view, it's hard to factor that in. If you have a product vision with many releases, then you can start thinking, okay, those are the things I need to do this year because that's what the market is waiting for, but those are the things I should work on because sooner or later I'd like to be good with this, good with AI, machine learning, for instance, just to give an example. Product culture, as I said, it's actually well suited to information systems, so which is why I'm excited to support my colleagues in the room who are the lean and agile coaches. And one of the most important aspects of this for me and is that it helps to take continuous good care of your systems, including refactoring. Right? The last part I can go quickly because I think it has been covered in almost all the talks during the whole day. That is, how do you develop this product culture? How do you improve your skills? In very much as in lean manufacturing, what you do is you improve the speed at which you do your tool changes. And it's hard at first, but the more you change your tool, you do your setup quickly, the better you become at your process. And the same thing is the same thing here. That is, and Pierre explained this beautifully, it's the tension between the stop the flow and pull the flow. And to be good at releases, you have to do more of them. One of the benefits is you will have a shorter takt time to introduce new features, but the other benefit is you're going to get better. And a third benefit is that the only way to do that is through automation, and automation brings you a number of other good things. A big challenge, and I put a military picture to say there is a challenge there, is how do you build truly autonomous squads? And one of the challenges, to be very precise, is to have an autonomous squad, you need an autonomous product owner. When I come to AXA, I said, okay, my rule will be there is no question that the product owner can answer in less than 3 hours, which means that the product owner owns the product and doesn't need to call for a committee that will ask for the bosses to make their mind and so on. And it's a challenge. There are many companies in which getting fast answers to the questions about the product is still difficult and slow. And my experience over the last 15 years is that the frequency of the decision matters. That is really when you're developing a digital tool and you are making a decision at a slow pace, you're really running with a heavy burden on your back. I already made that point that complexity doesn't travel well through PowerPoint and that people should come where the problem is as opposed to trying to solve problems remotely. So this is a short quote from Jürgen Appelow's book. I don't have enough. I will tell you the longer version. The longer version is interesting. It says, the real reason for empowerment is not to make people happier. It's not to see smiley face. That's the way he says it. It's really because it's the only way to solve real hard problems. And the reason I'm excited about this is because, frankly, it's still a challenge. In many companies' management culture, the idea that true empowerment is not there to make people happier or more efficient or faster, but actually still the same idea. The true complexity means that you have to be there to understand what's really happening. So select the right people and trust them. That was explained this morning also very well, saying that empowerment, when you are delivering empowerment, there are a few people that you are taking control and power from, and there's still a little bit of resistance there. Here, the key idea is the follow-up. For true empowerment to work on the Gemba at the squad level, you need at all management level to have a true customer centricity. So it's sort of a little trick, but I'm going to give you a few examples. And the short reason for this is if you make decision on the spot because of what the customer wants, it has to be a strong argument when sooner or later you will have to explain why you made that decision. The first thing that was explained very nicely also this morning is the customer will decide what works for her and what does not. And it's not the senior managers, it's not a group of experts, it's actually the customer that will decide. And very often you will discover during your iteration process, if you follow a lean startup process, for instance, there will be a point where you discover that something that looked very nice doesn't actually help the customer, although all your previous interviews, everything that you did right told you that it was going to be the best feature of the product, and the reality calls, and the customer doesn't really like it. A second key idea is that we live in a world where our customers, it's obviously true if you think of yourself with your iPhone or your favorite smartphone, but it's sort of true everywhere. The customer is the architect of her experience. That's a famous quote. It means that we are assembling, as customers, products and services and pieces from different sources, and we are sort of doing whatever we want with them. So it's a fun sentence from an IT perspective because it changes the way we deliver value as companies to our users. It, for instance, means that if you have a service exposure strategy with APIs, you have to grow that strategy from the customer feedback as opposed to from the brilliance of your design in a closed room. And it's true for B2C markets, but it's also true for B2B market. And last, this is why I put a WeChat example on the phone. The customer picks her software ecosystem. And the WeChat is a simple B2C example, but it works very well for B2B example as well. In our day, the digital companies have to learn to develop, sort of project their value on whichever software ecosystem that the customer has picked, as opposed to, I will pick my ecosystem and hope that the customer will come with me. And it's a change. So if everybody agrees on this, it's okay. It's a long journey and we will iterate. But if you have a squad which is launched with those principles and the boardroom that still believes that we have a strategy and we should follow the strategy, you will have a clash. And last but not least, because I'm an architect by heart, the role of the architect is changing. So first, I should say that I strongly believe that we need architects, and that's the discussion that Pierre was having with the Hoshin, that is, even though you're working in an agile way, you need to have an intent, you need to anticipate. Most of the things that you anticipate may not happen, and so it's a different world, but still, building complex systems requires a little bit of engineering. What changes in the squad is that the architect becomes a pull resource as opposed to a push. That is, 15 years ago, for those of you who were, as I was, an architect, you would issue a beautiful architecture and you will pass it to the development team, and they will look at it and they will implement some of your brilliance. That's done. It doesn't work anymore, because by the time you're finished with your schema, the world has changed so much that most of what you had in mind need to be reevaluated. Not everything. The principles may stand. But what we expect nowadays is for the architect to be a local coach that will help the team to take care of their technical debt. I'm a little bit obsessed on this one, sorry. To learn about design patterns, to better architect their code, and so on. For me, the architect on the squad is also the system engineering coach and champion. And you remember, I'm very focused on operational excellence. And as I told you earlier, operational excellence means system engineering and everybody be understanding what system they're building and what they're part of, locally and globally. So I think I've bored you enough already about technical debt. But the other role of the architect is really to be the champion and the owner of the APIs that sort of orchestrate communication between system to system, squads to squads. So I call this, it's a little kind of a French joke, it's the integration grammar. It's of the architect defines the language that will tell the teams how they can collaborate and build larger scale systems from their own pieces. So to conclude, I'm perfectly on time, you can. First, I think that, I hope it was obvious, I'm a strong believer, after now 3 companies and 15 years, no, 12 years, strong believer that lean and agile is actually the right way to deliver value when you're building software in a complex, changing world. And the last part is important, that is, there are cases where you have no rework, you don't meet your deadlines, all the criteria that I gave you, they don't apply, and waterfall works beautifully. So I'm not. But if you have a complex changing world, lean and agile is the right thing to do. As I said, lean and agile practices, they are drawn, they are built bottom up, and they're actually developed by those who are doing the practices, as opposed to us managers or us coaches. And that's important to understand, which is also why I'm so interested in this, what I call the systemic condition for this to work well. I'm thinking like a gardener, so to speak. And actually, that's my third point. For me, managers are gardeners. And if that sounds a little too sweet, so let me be more blunt. So they must protect the condition of emergence against tailored control addict and top-down corporate culture. So any... if that rings a bell, it's just pure luck. And for me, this is not a choice, because as Mark Andreessen said, software is eating the world, and some companies are doing it very well. So I hope that you either have already read Accelerate, or that you're going to buy a copy of the book that is on the table, but you will find out that out of 20,000 companies that were sampled in the book, the ones that are actually applying in Agile DevOps practices, they're actually doing very well. So I will stop here and answer any questions.